Alright, we're going to be short with the intro here because we've covered most of this in the Twilight of the Dark Master video. Speaking of, I'm sure some of you may notice that it's been some time since the release of that video. Sorry about that, translations take time. This one was done about 3 months after the original Twilight of the Dark Master video by a translator I greatly liked named Ruki. However, this translator is no longer taking commissions, so it is what it is, but Ruki didn't do the sound effects for this, so I sent it over to King Shu to have that done. I also wanted to have Oni Barai translated by the time I worked on this video, and that did happen, but I ended up coming down with the sickness this month and got behind. So in this video, we'll only be covering Kaen Majin. Oni Barai will have to wait until next month. I think you'll find this book interesting. I can feel that Saki Okusei, the mangaka, had a vision and a plan for a bit of the world, the lore, the way things function, but how much of that is actually solidified in the mind of the mangaka is hard to tell. As stated in the previous video, this was originally released in 1987, with Twilight of the Dark Master releasing 4 years later in 1991. Unfortunately, out of the series, only Twilight of the Dark Master was translated, until now. Though the mangas only have a 4-year gap in between their releases, it is estimated that it is a 30-year gap between the two events. With Kaen Majin, Tsunami will state that he is 81 years old, meaning that by the time of the events of Dark Master, he is somewhere around 110. While this will cover some of the origins of Tsunami, it will also create a lot more questions to this aspect, in addition to an extra chapter called Transmigration, which comes at the end of the special Kaen Majin collection that holds both Kaen Majin and Twilight of the Dark Master. We'll cover that chapter in the next video though. And once again, while it provides some more info on how Tsunami exists, it continues the trend of creating more questions. Honestly, if I keep going with this, I might have to find a way to just formulate a theory video, be it 5 or 10 minutes, to talk about all of the lore that I actually can dive into, because Saki Okusei gives us these little tangents, these little tidbits that, well, they seem to be based on actual Japanese history, but that's something we'll see further on once we get there. It seems Okusei really just wants to trickle a little information here and there, never giving us the full story, and leaving us only to further speculate. One character who will be of especially curious origin is a member of the clan known as the Wakimi family, Ayanosuke. But why this brings more questions, we'll have to unfortunately wait until the next video. I feel like I used a lot of words to say nothing, so let's just get on with it. If you're new here, I basically provide an audiobook-like experience of the subject material. As always, graphic content is abound. Fasten your seatbelts. We're taking off now. Chapter 1. The Aristocratic Demon Lord. A train pulls into a station, and a girl begins running through the crowd. As she does, she remembers the words of a letter delivered to her which brought her on this journey, a letter which she carries in her hand. Greetings. We have gone over your letter, and Master seems to have taken great interest. As this is an urgent matter, we'll meet you tomorrow. In other words, the day you should receive this letter. We will be waiting on the south exit of J.R. Odawara Station at 4 p.m. If you see a tall man with white hair and a black coat, that is Master. I believe you'll recognize him at first glance. Ahead is that tall man, obviously standing out amongst the crowd, which is taking notice of his appearance. A rather large man is pushing his way through the crowd as well as the girl draws closer, and the white-haired man is still being analyzed by those around him. She spots the white-haired man and approaches him, but he sweeps her behind him, giving her only the warning of, "Just a minute," as the large man continues to push his way through the crowd. The white-haired man takes a step, and the large man approaches him. "Walking under the sunlight without even casting a shadow," remarks the white-haired man, and the large man responds, asking him who he is. And he introduces himself. Tsunami Togen. For those of you who watched the Twilight of the Dark Master video, do remember that Ibaraki said that Tsunami went by a different name when he was younger, which he is here. With an apology, he tells the large man that he can't let him have that girl, who is currently taking cover behind a wall, noticing that that man has been following her all the way from Yokohama. Tsunami informs the man that the girl is a precious victim after all, and he's been searching for you people for many years. Tsunami takes his leave, saying that he'll see the man around, but he's kind of in a hurry. He then signals for the girl to come with him, leaving the man pondering just what kind of man he just met. He seems to have a shadow, but at Tsunami's office, which in this story is not in the old rundown part of town, his secretary, Kurumi, is in the process of hanging up on a man who is asking the agency to handle a case involving a Mujina, or shapeshifter, which she not so politely declines before slamming down the phone and remarking that the occult fad is troubling lately. Just then, in walks Tsunami and the girl, who he introduces as Yumi Aihara, before asking Kurumi to make some coffee. Kurumi introduces herself, Makoto Kurumi, and Yumi recognizes that she must be the one who sent the letter. With a smile, Kurumi says that Tsunami is a bit weird, right? But Yumi can rest easy and leave it to him, whether it's a devil or a demon lord. There's no one in this world who is a match, so just put her faith in him. Tsunami asks if something is wrong, and both girls respond no before Kurumi goes to make coffee. Night has fallen. Tsunami grabs Yumi's chin and tilts her head, revealing 2 puncture marks on her neck. There's no mistaking it. He asks her to explain. Her father, Masashi Aihara, was a freelance reporter that would write special features in weekly magazines and such. Since around 3 years ago, a certain pharmaceutical company has been keeping their eyes on him. Tsunami interjects that it was Komi Pharmaceuticals, based in Kanai, Yokohama, right? And Kurumi adds that they are currently investigating the company. Yumi responds that, according to her father, it's a new company that suddenly popped up 3 years ago. Tsunami tells Yumi that, if it's her father, Mr. Aihara, that man had come to see him several times before for interviews. He said that he specialized in reporting on unknown creatures and stuff of the occult. Yumi says that's right. She thinks that the pharmaceutical company is also related to that. That's about all she knows. As for the rest, just 2 nights ago, her father's throat got bit to pieces by something, and then some beast, like a giant bear. Out in the hallway, a large man is stepping off an elevator, and Tsunami knows this. He stops Yumi and tells her to hold on a second. The man outside the door begins to transform, destroying his clothes, and inside, Yumi is panicking, but Tsunami is calm and collected. He expected this. It's the man from earlier, a werewolf. It lets out a vicious howl, and Yumi clings to Tsunami as he calmly sips his coffee, remarking that the rumors are true. It has a vulgar howl. Yumi pleads with him that they should hurry and leave. It's what killed her father. But he tells her it's okay. He already set the embers. It goes quiet, and Tsunami sets down his mug. The door cracks before exploding, throwing glass into the room, which Tsunami shields Yumi from. He levels his gaze at the giant creature before him. It begins to approach, and he warns it not to get any closer, or he will turn it to ash. The creature roars, and Kurumi ushers Yumi out of the room quickly before it charges. Very quickly, a burst of fire scorches its claw and face. It falls back while Tsunami tells it that it was foolish and seems to have touched one of the embers, continuing that when it gets back, he wants it to tell him something. With a snap of his fingers, a fresh flame erupts from the creature's shoulder. It stares at Tsunami, enraged, but he only continues. Tell him that, if he wants her back, come and take her himself. The werewolf charges, but Tsunami snaps again, and a ball of flame erupts behind the monster. It continues to run, but Tsunami stands his ground, and the werewolf passes by, crashing through the window to make its escape. With a gentle grin, Tsunami remarks that the werewolf managed to dodge the last shot. Kurumi emerges with Yumi and asks if she should brew more coffee. He says that'd be great. Yumi asks just what the hell is he, but he disregards for the moment, asking Kurumi to bring the coffee to the study while he goes over the belongings Masashi Aihara left behind, which Yumi brought. In the study, the walls are lined with books and Tsunami is sitting on a cushion on the floor. He reads over a tale which was in the belongings. Thus, should a woman be like this, in a place far from people, being called by an unknown man should be avoided after careful consideration, as it is a matter that one should fear gradually and cautiously. So the tale's been told, and so it's been handed down. Kurumi emerges from the stairway with the coffee, asking if what he's reading is Tales of Times Now Past. He found it tucked between the pages of a notebook among Mr. Aihara's belongings, along with several newspaper articles. Looks like he had it copied from some library. It's the Demon Feast incident at Butodoken Matsubara. He asks what happened to Yumi, and Kurumi replies that she has put her to bed just to be safe. But is Tsunami sure it's okay? What if that guy shows up again? Almost ever smiling, Tsunami responds that even if he is a werewolf, he won't be able to move around properly until tomorrow. With a cheerful smile of her own, she agrees and asks just what kind of story it is that Tsunami is reading. He replies that it's a tale that says beautiful girls like her shouldn't follow strange men easily. She kneels down and puts her arm around him, and with a giggle says, "Thanks, Papa." Slyly, he responds that he told her to stop calling him that. It will reveal his age. As her face draws closer to his, he continues, "The Demon Feast incident, you see, is famous for being the first story that includes demons and eerie events in official history. Apart from Tales of Times Now Past, it's also in works like Kokon Chomonju, Sandai Jitsuroku, and Tales of Fuso." He sets down his cup and saucer. Though it is from a time now past, one night in the third year of the Nina era, 887, three elegantly dressed women were strolling through the pine grove of the Butokuden, playfully making their way towards the inner quarters. It was at that time, under the brilliant moonlight, that a handsome man appeared. He suddenly took hold of one of the girl's hands and engaged in conversation with her under the shade of a pine tree. Seeing the circumstance, the other two waited, thinking their conversation will end soon. But she did not seem to be returning, and her voice also faded away. The two began to have doubts, and what they discovered was nothing but her hands and feet, ruthlessly dismembered. They could not find her head nor her body. Soon the men from Uemon's camp arrived, but aside from the remaining hands and feet, not a single trace of the handsome man could be found. This is the Demon Feast incident at the Butodoken Matsubara. He tells her to have a look at a newspaper clipping. She takes it and begins to read. Ruthless, dismembered female college student slaughter case? At around 7 a.m. on the 19th, a left arm and right ankle believed to belong to a woman was discovered at a park in Hodogaya Ward, Yokohama City. The driver's license found in a nearby handbag revealed that the woman was Sawako Umakawa, 20, a second-year student at a junior college in the same city. According to police investigations, the victim was heading home from a party with two friends from her junior college at around 11 p.m. on the 18th, before being approached by a tall, strikingly handsome man who appeared to be a foreigner dressed entirely in black inside Yokohama Station. Tsunami interjects that, for the record, that isn't him. And Kurumi continues. Although there were a number of people who witnessed the victim and man clad in black, since the last sighting by a couple in the park where the dismembered body parts were discovered, it is as if he vanished into thin air and his whereabouts have not been traced. Tsunami tells her to read the last part. Investigation results. Not a single trace of blood could be found at the scene, and due to the fact that the left arm and right ankle was completely extracted of blood, the scene of the crime is believed to be elsewhere, and that the blood was extracted by some sort of method. Furthermore, the wound on the body seemed as if it had been bitten off by some sort of gigantic wolf, prompting even the nearby zoo. She stops, stumbling over her words. This is... Tsunami takes a drink and speaks. It seems that the werewolf from earlier isn't as gluttonous as they thought. To think he'd leave an arm and an ankle. That clipping is dated July 19th, 3 years ago. Komi Pharmaceuticals was founded 3 years ago. In the last 3 years, there have been two similar cases that involved three women going missing after being approached by a handsome man. But Tsunami thinks there is even more than that. About the Demon Feast. According to this Sandai Jitsuroku, in the month of August in the third year of Nina, there were as many as 36 unusual occurrences attributed to this demon, and it seems they couldn't even keep a record of each one. In other words, Kurumi interrupts. He doesn't mean. Her thought trails off. But that would be over 1,000 years ago. Tsunami says that at least that's what Masashi Aihara was thinking. But Tsunami isn't a historian, and it might just be that it appeals more to weekly magazines. Kurumi seems nervous, and Tsunami tells her to get some rest. They should hear from Maeda tomorrow. He says that she knows he won't die, right? To which she responds that it's not that she's worried about his safety. She's scared of their opponent this time for some reason. And Tsunami replies that it's only natural. He's a demon king that's been reigning in the world's darkness for hundreds, no, for over 1,000 years. Everyone knows about him. He's why we unconsciously fear the darkness and long for light. Everyone has met him at some point. The Count. Yumi is running, but then she's seated at her desk at home. She asks her father if something is wrong as the door slowly creaks open, his head sliding through below the doorknob as he begins to tell her he's sorry. He's gotten involved with something terrible. She even stayed with him instead of going with her mom, and now he hasn't been able to do anything for her. And now it's turned out like this. Bloody, crying, hanging on to the doorknob, he gives one last apology before collapsing to the floor. Realizing what has happened, Yumi begins to panic, and then her window bursts. The werewolf stands outside and she begins to run. The night is full of fog and she stops in front of a bridge. There, a man in a cloak stands above, vampire fangs exposed in his open mouth. Yumi awakes in a bed and begins to cry, begging for her father to help. The next day, in an office building, it seems a reporter has shown up to ask questions. The man receiving the reporter's card says he'll be direct and asks how much he knows already. The reporter casually leans back in a sofa and states that he's an acquaintance of Masashi Aihara. Isn't that enough? One of the two bodyguards behind him angrily calls him a bastard. The man he is interviewing at the desk, though, remains calm, stating absolutely. Allow him to ask one more question. Can he take it that this man knows the likes of Masashi Aihara? Casually, the reporter replies, asking if he's stupid. He came because he doesn't know. Yesterday, he visited a development factory of Komi Pharmaceutical in Nagano. Pretty interesting place. The man at the desk adjusts his glasses, and the reporter stands, continuing. Just as expected of a company that developed over 30 new drugs in just 3 years. He would never have thought that the manager and the Yakuza were involved in the development. He takes off his sunglasses as the man behind the desk responds. It seems playtime is over. He indeed heard reports that someone attacked their other factory. The reporter answers back that he wasn't playing from the start. He tucks his sunglasses into his jacket as the two bodyguards close in behind him, stating that he sees, but it seems like there's a big difference in weight class, and he does seem much larger. The man at the desk says with a smile to go ahead and try. The two bodyguards are different from the guards at the factory. They even once defeated 3 pro wrestlers in under just 1 minute. Undeterred and smiling, the reporter says, "Karate, huh?" He's glad to hear that. He's actually fought some pro wrestlers before, too. Just once for an opening act, though. He swings his arm backwards, and he continues to explain that, when he did, he ended up incapacitating 2 of his tag team opponents in 30 seconds. That swinging arm catches one of the bodyguards, knocking him back and over a table, and surprising the man at the desk as the reporter casually continues that ever since he's been scared to approach beginners. Don't worry, as long as they don't slack on their daily training, they won't die. The remaining bodyguard goes in for a kick, and the reporter swiftly ducks under as it misses his head. He grabs the leg and now has the man in a hold. The man at the desk gave way too much information away with the wrestler's story. Karate using Yakuza will always go for weak points when trying to take down big men. With both bodyguards down, he turns his attention back to the man at the desk, asking him to tell of the whereabouts of his CEO, Ryoki Komi. The man stands up and begins to speak. What does the reporter intend to do with that knowledge? Ask about the medicine's formula or something? No matter. It's not like he'll get out of here alive. As the man bares his vampire fangs, the reporter suddenly holds up a crucifix, and it causes the man to recoil in pain, demanding the reporter not point it at him. The reporter coolly responds that he was told to bring this by Tsunami, but they both know that this man doesn't expose himself to sunlight, addressing him by his name as Director Takazawa. He's a sacrifice as well, isn't he? The reporter can escape by breaking through the window, but outside would be rather hot for the director, wouldn't it? In a dark room, figures unseen so far discuss Tsunami. He who summons fire, fire sorcerer, Kaen Majin. Can we truly call someone who has the ability to induce spontaneous combustion a human? A coffin begins to open as the speech continues. He's encountered a number of them during his time in the West, but it's his first time hearing of one of that caliber. It makes him want to meet him, this Tsunami token. As a hand reaches out of the coffin, pushing back the lid, the body inside instructs the man standing over him, Roga, to take the drug. He protests, saying that the drug is still, but is interrupted by the man emerging from the coffin. It's no matter. This man emerging from the coffin asks Roga how long before his wound heals, indicating to us that Roga is the werewolf, and he responds that due to the full moon, it's already almost healed. The coffin man replies cryptically to confirm that shadow, which is said to be thinner than his sacrifices, it must be under the sunlight. This is the Count. It's morning time, and Kurumi is bringing breakfast to Yumi at a table and asks how she slept. She's answered with the girl telling her that the sun was so bright she couldn't really... Kurumi begins to apologize that she forgot to shut the curtains, but Yumi tells her it's not that. The sunlight burned. Kurumi starts to respond that the weather today isn't that hot, but then she remembers. Yumi gets up from the table and asks if she can shut the curtains of the room, but as she nears the window, she suddenly enters a trance. He's calling. Laying on the floor of his study upstairs with a magazine over his face, Tsunami lifts the pages and says, "It's time." Yumi continues to stand at the window in her stupor, only saying, "The Count is calling." Kurumi tries to shake her out of it as Tsunami enters the room, telling her that they are heading out. She questions how far, and he answers coolly that they're going to a place a noble would like, Odawara Castle. Soon they arrive, and Tsunami ushers the two ladies accompanying him away, telling Kurumi to take care of Yumi, and standing opposing him is the vampire, the Count, who seems to have expected Tsunami, telling him that he has grown tired of waiting. Tsunami seems surprised. He never thought that this vampire would show up so brazenly under the sunlight. It seems the legends need some corrections. The Count tells him that he will be turning 2020 years old this year, and asks how old Tsunami is. Does he also wish to defeat him and become the ruler of the dark? Unenthused, Tsunami coldly responds, "Nope, not at all." Back at Director Takazawa's office, it seems he has a new problem, one which states that it paid his bodyguard a little visit before coming, accusing him that his mouth has gotten loose. Sweating, he addresses the man by name, Zagenki, asking when he returned and closing by calling him a punk. A bald man with two bodyguards of his own opposes him, holding a cross with a smile, stating that they reached Narita last night. It took a bit later than expected because of a little detour. The director begins to plead, saying that there was nothing he could have done, but Zagenki retorts, "Nothing he could have done?" The Count has told him that the cross causes agony for vampires, but it can never kill them. If it's just a little pain, surely one can tolerate it. Takazawa is becoming upset, but Zagenki continues that it was just a single reporter, meaning that his tolerance was lacking. Takazawa stands and begins to shout that it was more than a mere reporter managing to take down his skilled fighters in just 30 seconds. Surely he carries monster blood, like these bastards. Unfazed, Zagenki asks if he's a monster, doesn't that make Takazawa of the same kind? Takazawa confidently states that he was drained of blood by that person, the blood of a well-respected noble. He's not like these inferior yokai that are even lower than barbarians of the East. Just being associated with a monster like him makes Takazawa sick. Now, Zagenki dons a smile which surprises the director. It's his turn. Hasn't the director noticed? He said something that must never be said. First, Takazawa begins to insult, but as Zagenki transforms, turning into the familiar demon form we saw in the Dark Master series, he begins to beg, but it's too late. Vampires are already living dead. Surely there's no longer any concern about dying. And while it's not shown, it can be assumed that Takazawa is being eaten. Kurumi is running, dragging Yumi behind her, and the girl can't do it anymore. She asks for a place with shade, but suddenly she stops. Kurumi asks her what's wrong, but she can only point. It's the werewolf from earlier, though currently in his human form, Roga. A sports car slides to a halt at a crosswalk, and out steps the reporter from earlier. I think by the context of his visit with director Takazawa earlier and Tsunami's conversation with Kurumi, we can assume that this is Maeda. He stops immediately, asking what Tsunami was going to do if this touched a normal person. Revealing what he meant, Maeda takes a rolled-up magazine and swats the air, connecting with one of Tsunami's embers, questioning why they would be planted at a place like this. As he walks away, though, he concludes that they wouldn't be reached unless it was by someone huge like him. He then tosses the magazine into a nearby river, where it combusts further. Back with the confrontation between the Count and Tsunami, the vampire lets out a small chuckle, and Tsunami asks if something is funny. The Daywalker responds that it's strange. He knew they would meet someday, so he was looking for him, but it's not like he was really searching. For the time being, he'd like to put him in his place. Tsunami coolly remarks that he's not handing over the girl. The vampire continues, ruler of the dark, the reign of the Demon King, and eternal life, or omnipotent knowledge of magic. He sees these things are meaningless to Tsunami. However, Tsunami interjects. He has just one thing he wants to ask of this vampire, but the Count dismisses his question. There's only one thing for certain. The curse placed on that girl will never be lifted without defeating him. I know, Tsunami says, and the vampire begins to smile with excitement, exclaiming that he's so glad. It's been hundreds of years since he felt this way. He truly is happy to have established position as Tsunami's adversary. He begins to lift off the ground while laughing maniacally, and Tsunami prepares his attack. With a smile, he says he is too. A snap of his fingers, and flames erupt over the shoulder of the vampire, who smiles ever the more as he begins to fly away, saying that they will meet again, with Tsunami's response implying that his plan was more or less seen through. It seems that the werewolf and the Count really won't go down with just some sneaky tricks. A flaming object strikes the ground in front of him, presumably what was used to mitigate his strike. At least, that's what I thought until I was actually reading through my script, and I realized this happens multiple times, and I thought maybe they were just things that were actually used to mitigate the strike. No. These are actually pieces of the Count which are falling off of him every time Tsunami strikes him. He just sacrifices pieces of his flesh. Anyways, he remarks saying, "What a cruel thing to do to an innocent girl." But the undead lord isn't entirely done, telling Tsunami that there's a nice surprise behind him, something valuable. Casually still casting his gaze at the Count, Tsunami says that he sees. That's why the vampire chose the castle park. There were indeed a few of them, weren't there? A crazed lion steps out from behind him, and Tsunami says that he likes the Count's surprises, as it is also revealed that there is a female lion approaching as well. Back with our reporter Maeda, he removes his sunglasses and reveals that he's standing behind the werewolf, jokingly asking Kurumi, since when did she make a foreigner boyfriend? Tsunami is rough on handling people, isn't he? Maeda hasn't slept a wink since the day before yesterday. Kurumi tries to tell him to be careful, but he says he's got it. The werewolf recognizes that he is the man who assaulted Takazawa, but Maeda responds that he brought a cross just for the old man, but he has no silver bullets for him today. Kurumi takes off running with Yumi as Maeda taunts Roga about their escape. However, the Wolfman says the Count will take care of Tsunami before long and come here. It doesn't hurt for him to have a little fun once in a while. But Maeda says not to underestimate Tsunami. And him as well. He throws his sunglasses into the air before throwing a swift kick which the foreigner dodges under, coming back up for his own strike with a fist that Maeda maneuvers his head to the side of, taunting that he doesn't care if the man has lived 100 years or whatever, he's still an amateur. Maeda then grabs Roka, telling him to remember this well. It crippled his opponent's partner in a preliminary tag match. He hooks one of the legs and takes him down hard to the asphalt with a suplex. Kurumi is found unconscious on the ground, and Tsunami checks her, finding to his relief that she has not been bitten. The Wolfman is recovering, and Maeda is unsurprised that, being the creature he is, he can still get up after. However, the vampire is behind him carrying an unconscious Yumi and commenting that it's impressive that Maeda was able to take the werewolf to the ground even outside of his transformed state. Roga is surprised to see him, but the Count continues that Japan has always been such a strange country. Maeda isn't happy, asking himself if Tsunami is pushing both of these guys on him. As if to answer his question, a burst of flame goes past the vampire and into the water, revealing Tsunami smiling nearby with Kurumi in his arms, asking if Maeda was going to take his share as well. While Maeda is distracted, Roga leaps over him and joins the Count, informing him that their time is almost up, and he's aware, additionally remarking that it seems that Tsunami wasn't so fond of his surprises, as is Tsunami's MO. An ember goes off, this one from under one of the tiles of the bridge. Another goes off as the Count begins to make his escape, telling Tsunami during his departure that the location of the hideout should have been heard from Takazawa. If Tsunami can make it there, he will hand over the girl. Tsunami warns the rest to get away as the bridge collapses from his embers detonating. When the collapse of the bridge is finished, Maeda has ended up in the water, and another ember detonates next to him, causing him to ask just how many embers did Tsunami bring along. That night, back at the Count's hideout, he senses an unease in Roga, who relays what bothers him, saying that if they were to attack first and take advantage of the darkness of the night, then even that flame demon would be no match. So why is it that... The Count cuts him off. Tonight is the 4th day that girl... He trails off. After tonight, she will become one of his kind. What will Tsunami Togen do then? By tomorrow, she will be a vampire, not a mere sacrifice. Even if he defeats the Count, the curse will not be lifted. Even legends cannot convey that much. Zagenki arrives, and is immediately told, "Good work," and the Oni relays that he's disposed of Takazawa. The Count informs him that he has been called for a reason, to which the Oni asks if it is to take care of the demon slayer, Tsunami. But no, he would like Zagenki to hold on to Komi Pharmaceuticals for a while. If he can just maintain the current situation for 1 year, that will be enough. Roga begins to protest, but the Count tells him not to get so fired up. This is Zagenki's chance. But with a smile, the Oni asks if it's a trap. The Count then asks, if Tsunami is a demon that controls fire, then what can Zagenki, a ghost who controls the will of the wisp, do for him? He remarks that it's strange. For some reason, even when the Count calls him that, it doesn't stir his demon blood. Seemingly still questioning the loyalty of this Oni, the Count asks if Zagenki is still playing coy at this point. What is he plotting by working with him? To which the Oni responds that he thought he would already know. But the Count says he doesn't, so just go ahead and say it. With a coy smile, Zagenki responds, the reign of the Demon King. The Count answers back with amusement, Zagenki, thou who carries the blood of barbarians desires for the reign of the Demon King. Were he to acquire it, how would he use it? The demon responds that he would use it to satisfy his own ego. That is all. But the Count is unsatisfied. What else? Is he saying he could do something like the reign of the Demon King? He sure knows how to say it. Maybe it should have been him after all. With a laugh, he says this is fun. The more entertainment there is, the more exciting this will become. With another, more bold laugh, he says that it feels like he's finally freed from his eternal boredom. Something has changed in Zagenki's face, though. He questions those words internally. Maybe it should have been you. Zagenki departs in a car, and an unseen figure asks him what the discussion with the Count was about. But he says he doesn't quite know, questioning what the Count is thinking. Somewhere else in the mansion, Yumi sits alone in the corner of a room, trembling, going through the obvious changes of becoming a vampire. At a gated family estate, Maeda and Tsunami visit a man named Ayanosuke, who is not particularly happy to see them so suddenly. It's rare for him to be in such a bad mood, though. Ayanosuke explains that he was planning to spend the night alone with someone named Yuka, and from the context that it costs 50 million yen for 2 nights, you'd be forgiven for assuming she's a prostitute. However, the conversation is stranger than that. Ayanosuke continues. That's why he told them to wait until he got married. But his greedy parents just won't listen. It seems they used gas, so there's some spots showing. But he asked Kazumi, the best corpse makeup artist in Japan. Yuka is very beautiful now. Would Tsunami and Maeda like to meet her? Maeda replies, sure, as long as it's after the cremation. He'll accompany Ayanosuke as much as he wants. He's not really good with anything bloody. And Tsunami asks if he should turn her to ash. Ayanosuke turns his head in disapproval while they chuckle a bit at him. He says he doesn't expect them to understand his refined hobbies. Tsunami gets down to the point for their visit, saying that he actually met him. Moreover, it seems they have established an adversarial relationship. He fought him once. Ayanosuke's demeanor changes, as he says to Tsunami that he's picked a fight, hasn't he? Asking what he's going to do. With a smile, Maeda says they'll storm into his mansion first thing tomorrow morning, with Tsunami finishing that he thought they should get the Wakimi family's approval, just to be safe. Having foreseen this outcome, Ayanosuke says he knew it would turn out this way, so he tried to avoid letting them meet as much as possible, but Tsunami retorts that as long as they're in the same Kanagawa prefecture, they'll meet whether they like it or not. With a serious face, Ayanosuke asks what he's planning to do by storming the mansion, and Tsunami responds that he's been saying it from the start, hasn't he? He has just one thing to ask. Ayanosuke knows, and says that he understands and gives his approval. Since it's about a vampire, the authority concerning the extermination of the demon tribe should have already been delegated to Tsunami. He reaches out and gently touches Tsunami's neck, his thumb lightly against the jawline of the demon slayer, saying there's one condition, and Tsunami asks what it is. He asks Tsunami that he have as few external injuries as possible when he dies. He can go ahead and die a magnificent death, and he'll cremate him immediately. Maeda questions this, but Tsunami only chuckles. A small note, this panel shows that while Maeda is a big guy, which we already know, Ayanosuke is even bigger, or at least taller. Maeda and Tsunami pull up to the gate of the mansion property, and as they approach, Maeda asks Tsunami if he's sure they should just boldly enter through the main gate, to which he has answered that they wouldn't go through the back door when they've been invited, no? But Maeda says he doesn't remember receiving an invitation letter. But doesn't Tsunami think this is weird? Tsunami replies with his own question. What is Maeda saying now? The Count invited them to be out in the sunlight, which he especially dislikes. The purpose isn't to silence them. He's just curious. They approach and open the door. He continues. That reason alone is enough for an immortal demon. A voice comes from the darkness. A form is crouched on the floor before the stairs, and it says it's been waiting. Tsunami asks the form, the werewolf, where are the Count and Yumi? Already transformed, the creature tells him that he may go ahead to the second floor. He only has business with Maeda. The burly man tells Tsunami to go as he sees that Roga is applying yesterday's lesson, transforming right from the start. With a smirk, Maeda says it's adorable, but he's sorry. He doesn't plan to be cremated by Ayanosuke anytime soon. Tsunami begins to ascend the stairs and tells Maeda that he quite likes the him that is alive. And that's answered with Maeda saying not to say stupid stuff like that. He sees, though, that this guy is on an entirely different level from yesterday. He takes a stance, and the werewolf roars. The upstairs shakes and rattles lab equipment due to the fight below as Tsunami enters the room in which the Count stands and greets him by title, then by name. Tsunami observes the room, noting that this is the research facility for Komi Pharmaceuticals. It makes sense for the Count, who has mastered the secret arts of black magic. Making things like cold medicine or athlete's foot cream should be a piece of cake. The Count opens his cloak, revealing Yumi and saying first he will give the girl back as promised. Tsunami may take her. Additionally, he will give one piece of advice. Yumi stumbles over to Tsunami, stutteringly asking for his blood as the Count continues. If someone who were bitten by a vampire cursed by his magic were to slay that vampire, then the curse would be lifted indeed. But those like that girl who have had their blood sucked by him personally. Yumi clings to Tsunami, preparing to sink her fangs into his neck while begging. He continues, once the morning of the 5th day has passed, no matter how much he tries to entomb the Count, the curse will never be lifted. It looks like one more correction has been added to his legend. Yumi gives up and begins to sink to the floor, begging Tsunami to burn her, turn her to ash. She begins to cry. Tsunami stands stoically and states that the Count has tricked him, but the Count retorts that that is an unfounded accusation. Tsunami says that he's a very selfish person. He'll be turning 81 this year, but his mental age hasn't grown past 14. His mother and father were just normal humans. Just before being consumed by flames and turning to ash, his mother called him a devil. When he came to, all the pigment had drained from his body. The vampire seems perplexed, questioning Tsunami's statements that his parents were just normal humans. No matter. That's fine. More importantly, he has a proposal. Ever since a certain event, he has been searching for an eternal partner for a long time. Someone who can be a demon, not only in the darkness, but under the sunlight. Doesn't he want the reign of the Demon King? But Tsunami only replies, "Shut up. I'm going to burn you." The fight rages on downstairs. Maeda lands a punch to the stomach of the werewolf, who in turn manages to slash his cheek. The two separate momentarily. As Maeda turns his back, the werewolf sinks his claws into the chest of Maeda from behind, but the man manages to grab the fur of the monster's shoulder and reverse into another punch to the stomach. He questions just how tough the monster is, but he notices something. Upstairs, the room becomes engulfed in flames, and the adversaries stand opposite of each other, with the Count laughing, calling Tsunami foolish, and revealing his true identity, asking if he believes he can really destroy the immortal demon Count Dracula with this little fire. But Tsunami with Yumi still clinging to his side, says that, indeed, neither the holy crucifix, a white wooden stake, or the great sunlight, let alone this fire, could possibly be enough to destroy the demon lord, Count Dracula. But he wonders, if every cell in his body is set ablaze simultaneously and turned to ash, can the vampire still claim immortality? The Count laughs, accepting the challenge and stating that if only Tsunami had kept quiet, he could have become the second Demon Lord. To think that after 2,000 years, the method to destroy his life will now be buried without ever having been discovered. Undisturbed, Tsunami tells Yumi to run. With her current body, jumping from the second floor should be nothing. He doesn't like seeing a lady crumble in flames. The Count comes in with a claw for a strike, and the two opponents seem to dance in the flames. Tsunami backs towards the window as the Count comes in for another strike, but misses as the fire demon breaks through the glass to the outside, landing gracefully on the grass. The Count is before him just as quick, taunting him, asking if his favorite embers finally ran out. Silently, Tsunami thinks to himself, not yet. It's not enough. If he misses even one cell, the Count will regenerate again. He has to send the embers to each and every cell at exactly the same time. Maeda and Roga are still engaged, now in a desperate grapple for leverage, but the werewolf distracts the man, telling him it looks like his partner is in trouble. Maeda turns to look, and Roga slashes his stomach. He manages to grab a wall and steady himself. Outside, the Count extends his arms and tells Tsunami to perish. He is a fool to defy the Demon Lord. Nearby, Yumi is succumbing to the effects of the sun on her new form. Tsunami keeps telling her to run, but where is she supposed to run to? There's no way she can escape from the sun. The werewolf commends Maeda, telling him he's had his fun. Looks like the werewolf can spend the rest of his short lifespan with no regrets. And outside, the Count raises his arms, telling Tsunami it's over. But part of his hand falls apart. He questions if he used too much. Engaged once again in the grapple with Maeda, the Wolfman shouts to the Count, "Vascular sclerosis. Could it be a side effect of the medication?" The vampire suddenly experiences more deterioration, and Tsunami takes notice. And then, Yumi grabs the Count from behind. She begs Tsunami to hurry, burn him along with her. The werewolf panics, but Maeda's not letting him get away, and Yumi continues. She doesn't want a cursed eternal life. A life that can't live under the sun is nothing but that. Please hurry. The Count is panicking as well, demanding she let go. Maeda swings at the werewolf, declaring another finishing move, and Tsunami stands calmly as this goes on. The werewolf dodges and shouts that he's coming to help his master. But Maeda smiles. It seems this was a trap. He slams a kick into the face of the werewolf. Yumi still clings to the Count, trying to hold him hostage, and Tsunami stands before them wordlessly. Then, he grabs Yumi by the face, snaps, and a rush of fire washes over the unconscious werewolf in the house, and also the Count and Yumi before Tsunami. When all is done, Yumi remains alive in Tsunami's arms, normal again, and questioning what happened. He says that he told her he doesn't like seeing a lady crumble in flames. She just lost 0.05% of all her cells, so she'll feel a little sluggish. But he only spread his embers to the 25.3 billion cursed cells. The Count, however, is still alive as well, and while not in great form, enough to be confident. The Count surmises that Tsunami was able to identify the cursed cells from the slight change in the DNA with them. He calls Tsunami a real demon, before laughing at his choice to save the girl instead of defeating him. It seems he didn't have enough embers. Maeda emerges from the burning mansion. The Count, still on fire, says to Tsunami that he had a question for him, right? He knows what he wants to ask. A question that everyone born a demon has at least once. He says his great father, Count Ri, the Grand Sorcerer, was already a cursed vampire. but his mother was nothing but an ordinary human woman. With that, the Count flies away and is gone, trailing away with a laugh that says, "Let's meet again." Maeda asks what that was about, but Tsunami's words leave more questions. He said to figure it out ourselves. With a smile, he says it's time to go. Some distance away, Zaginki observes the fire and smoke, asking his henchmen if he should be grateful that they saved him the trouble. It seems he wasn't just an exorcist of the Wakimi family. He'll have to visit sometime to thank him properly. Togen, Tsunami. Somewhere else, in a small family home, a man asks his wife if the tea is ready yet, and she tells his daughter to bring it to him. The girl protests. Why can't her brother do it? Being answered that he has entrance exams. Not all is right. Outside, a figure perches on a telephone pole, and a mass of small mutated demonic creatures are also somewhere nearby. As the girl capitulates, revealing that she flunked her own exam after all, a claw grabs the windowsill. The girl enters with the tea, but then, surprised by something, she drops it. A horned figure elsewhere dons a smirk, and behind the father, in the window, is the mass of small demon creatures. Chapter 2. The Zashiki Warashi. At a local high school, a group of girls are discussing their recent sighting of Tsunami. Of course, fawning over how he looks, one comparing him to Elric Saga, a reference to a fantasy book series by Michael Moorcock from the 1960s. Amidst this, one girl, Kasumi, has her head down on her desk and another girl is checking on her. Recently, she's been having bad nightmares, so she hasn't been sleeping well. The girl asks if it's about the old school building which they were about to demolish. Part of it collapsed, a part that is beyond the hallways with a rumor surrounding it. The hallway is shown. It has a mass of desks and chairs piled to the ceiling, preventing further passage. In her dream, the mummified remains of 4 schoolgirls were lined up against the wall where a blackboard is. She continues that on the other side of the barricade of desks and chairs, there's something called the Old Chemistry Lab, and lined up on top of the podium, there were 4 mummies dressed in sailor uniform. From right to left, they gradually get older, and the clothes they are wearing also become more tattered. But they were definitely this school's uniform. Entering the old school building as a gust of wind rushes through is Tsunami, and from behind him comes a voice saying that he must be the demon slayer. A man named Principal Osawa stands behind him and identifies himself as the one who sent a request to the Wakimi family. Tsunami asks who built this, referring to the barricade of desks and chairs, and the man responds that he's not too familiar. He's heard that during the previous principal's term, a certain distinguished monk sealed it away. Tsunami calls it impressive, total chaos, in all things in this world. Although at first glance there seems to be no order, in reality there tends to exist some sort of pattern and order. But this is not the case for this mountain of desks and chairs. You may be able to enter, but you can never escape. Within order, if you construct disorder, that becomes a barrier. Tsunami then introduces himself and tells Mr. Osawa that he will listen to what he has to say. And so, once in his office, he begins. Once every 5 years, 3 boys and 1 girl are to be sacrificed and allowed to enter the barrier. Nothing else is to be interfered with, and immediately to make contact with the Wakimi family if something were to happen. This is what the previous principal was instructed with by the distinguished monk, and that was passed down to Osawa. This is how he also was informed of the whereabouts of the Wakimi family. Tsunami lets out a light chuckle and speaks. So, the next sacrifice is a monk of esoteric Buddhism, closely connected to the Wakimi family. Osawa continues. The vice principal, who was the only other person besides him to know about this, was recently brutally murdered by someone. They were mauled to death by some sort of stray dog, but that's not what was so strange. Even though it is such a bizarre incident, even though it was such a huge tragedy, Neither their family nor the police seemed to care at all. It was the same when the student who was sacrificed disappeared. No one found it strange. They just accepted it as if it were normal. He's not afraid of being killed. He must atone for letting 8 of his students die. But when he thinks that no one will grieve their deaths, when he thinks of their whole being just being forgotten, Tsunami interrupts. It's a pre-established harmony, isn't it? This causes Osawa to question, and Tsunami goes on. Actually, he too is unable to completely defeat the demon. Looks like this one is troublesome. Demons are essentially spiritual life forms. They do not have physical bodies of their own. The traditional image of demons, which has been passed down through the ages, is merely the form of a person who has been possessed by a demon and has undergone metamorphosis. That is not the true form of a demon. However, they cannot exist in this world without borrowing a body, and they can only possess a fetus that meets certain conditions. Furthermore, no matter how many times their body is destroyed and annihilated, it will reincarnate again after a period of 10 to 300 years. During that floating period of 10 to 300 years, they carry out the predetermined harmony in order to fight against their natural enemy. As he continues speaking, a girl is approaching from the hallway. Just what is this predetermined harmony? It means that humans do not live everything by their own will. Since Tsunami, too, has never died, he cannot grasp the matters of the afterlife. But he says that it's like interfering with the laws of cause and effect, or perhaps fate. Osawa begins to protest. Should he say that they were only born and raised to be killed and sacrificed? It can't be. The girl has arrived outside the door, and as Osawa wrestles with these concepts, it is shown that as she stands there, her shadow has horns, and her eyes are blank. Tsunami senses the presence of the demon, but continues with the conversation anyways, asking where the previous headmaster is now. Osawa begins to answer that 3 months ago he disappeared. A knock comes at the door, covering Tsunami, remarking under his breath that Ayanosuke even makes better coffee as he takes a sip of the cup which was presented to him. Osawa calls for the visitor to come in. An office worker informs him that there is an urgent call and asks if he should transfer, but Osawa stands and denies and says it's okay. Osawa excuses himself, and Tsunami responds to take his time. As he leaves with the office worker, the girl clings to the ceiling above them. Tsunami relaxes and calls for her to come in. The door creaks as the clawed hand of the girl grasps the edge, saying ominously, "Found one, found one." Finally, she found one who carries the blood of Genji. Meanwhile, Osawa has answered the phone, but back with the girl, she enters the room saying Tsunami Togen is her natural enemy, repeating the word kill, as Tsunami seems unaffected, saying he's been underestimated, and calling this a doll, spelled D-A-H-L. The girl begins to fully take on a demonic form, complete with horns, fangs, and fire in her palms, saying to kill Tsunami, the one who transformed to Suna. Okay, I apologize, but let's pause here for a moment, because there are a few terms all of a sudden being thrown at us, like Suna and the blood of Genji, and these terms actually can lead us down the deep rabbit hole that is, well, possibly revealing the deeper origins of Tsunami. Maybe we can do a video theory crafting on that, but let's get into it. I'm not a historian, so forgive me. Genji can be a synonymous alternate term for the actual historical Minamoto clan. Suna, or Watanabe no Suna, is also a real historical figure. Some may recognize the name from the Fate series. He was a legendary samurai in the Saga Genji branch of the Minamoto clan, with his official surname being Minamoto and chosen surname being Watanabe. He was the step-grandson of the Seiwa Genji and Shinjufu shogun Minamoto no Mitsunaka, the Seiwa Genji being a line of the Minamoto clan descending from Emperor Seiwa. He was also the traveling companion and retainer of his step-uncle Minamoto no Yorimitsu, another legendary samurai. However, There are many tales about the adventures of Watanabe no Suna, including tales where he fights and slays demons. One of these being one where he accompanies his uncle to slay the demon Ibaraki Doji, and he manages to sever its arm, which he takes home as a trophy. And if you remember Twilight of the Dark Master, you may recall that there was a character named Doji Ibaraki in the manga who briefly attempts to fight Tsunami and had earlier relayed to the incest twins that he had encountered Tsunami before under a different name, which may also become relevant further into this chapter as well. So, is it possible that Tsunami, who we have already seen change his name between Twilight of the Dark Master and Kaen Majin, is a descendant or even possibly the reincarnation of Watanabe no Suna? Suna to Tsunami seems like an easy transition of name in English, but in Japanese, the kanji are distinctly different. So I'm not sure how much weight my theory would hold of Suna being a contraction of Tsunami. However, Tsunami says he does not know of the afterlife because he has not died before. Only, it may be that he does not remember dying, or it may be that he never enters the afterlife when he dies. Now you may be asking, do I have evidence that he has died before? Well, you'll have to wait until the next video for that. Sorry for that tangent. On with the story. Osawa is yelling into the phone, recognizing the voice on the other end as Mr. Manaka and asking where he is. He can possibly assume that he is the previous headmaster. In the other room, the demon girl thrusts fireballs at Tsunami, which he dodges. She then launches a blast from her mouth, which he also dodges, and he comes in from above, grabbing her face. He snaps and lets go. The girl recoils and grabs her head with both hands. Osawa is still talking with Manaka, who says, "My bad." As the principal asks what happened to him, he continues that he's been lying. The monk never told him to sacrifice 4 people. Don't let anyone near the barrier. That's all he was told by the monk, and he begins to cough. On the other end of the line, we see that Mr. Manaka is bleeding and in rough shape inside of a phone booth. Osawa asks if he's okay, but he says just to listen. The truth is, that thing is his grandchild. It was 21 years ago. He had a daughter who was in her second year of high school. She had gotten along with a certain chemistry teacher and gotten herself pregnant. By the time he realized, she was already 4 months pregnant, so an abortion was off the table. Something must have gone wrong in that chemistry teacher's head. He forced his concocted medicine on the daughter, Kikuyo. He tried to miscarry the child in her womb. Breaking through her struggling, writhing stomach, what came out was not a 4-month-old fetus. In fact, it wasn't even human. By the time he rushed over, the chemistry teacher had already been turned mostly to bones. It was at that moment when it said to him, "Grandpa, save me." It might have been a demon child, but it was his grandchild. It asked him for 3 humans every 5 years. He requested the monk build the barrier because it wanted one. The reason for the one girl is because he thought it would get lonely. There is a chomping sound coming from below Manaka. Suddenly he vomits blood. As he sinks, he laughs and says, "It looks like this is..." and no more words come out. He's being devoured by the mutated, demonic children from the beginning of the chapter, as Osawa yells over the phone for a response. With Tsunami and the demon girl, she begins to vomit. What comes out of her is one of the mutated demon children that only continues to repeat, "Kill Tsunami. Found him. My natural enemy." Tsunami remarks that it is demonic doll sorcery. How nostalgic. An old friend? He snaps his fingers. As Osawa hangs up the phone, he's in disbelief. It can't be. He's been nurturing it all this time? Tsunami enters the room carrying the girl and instructs Osawa to take her to a doctor. She suffered some light burns, but it shouldn't be an issue. Near the phone booth where Manaka was killed, there is a rustling in the grass. A hooded and cloaked figure with a mouth full of sharp fangs smiles and joyfully states that he ate him. He ate Manaka. And next up is the nurturer. Kazumi Osawa. Principal Osawa has dumped piles of photos onto a table in front of Tsunami, stating that it's just about everything. There's no guarantee that all the students of the school are in there, but he thinks it's almost close to that. Tsunami replies that he wonders if he, referring to the demon, will honestly choose from the students of the school for him. While Tsunami looks over everything, Osawa is still wrestling with the recent events and revelations, remarking that he is finally the last one. Just what sort of pre-established harmony is waiting for him? But Tsunami calmly answers his question that he already accomplished his duty. He is the challenge that the demon sent him. Osawa questions this, saying that was 21 years ago, and Tsunami goes on that this time the demon must be really confident. After all, it's only natural given that he spent 35 years creating a predetermined harmony. Osawa asks Tsunami just what he is, and is answered with a smirk that Tsunami has only lived a little longer than him. That's all. In a classroom, while the teacher gives instructions on what page to turn to and begins reading aloud, the students are discussing Kazumi's recent nightmares and insomnia, with the revelation of a demon child being at the school, going as far as to even speculate that it may be prophetic before the teacher calls on them to quiet down. Elsewhere, a window on the door to the old school breaks. It was the cloaked figure, and a school gym coach takes notice. He goes to investigate, believing it's one of his own students skipping class, but upon inspecting the window, concludes that the large figure he saw could not have gotten through there. He must be fast. On the other side, though, the figure crouches, muttering to itself that it will abduct Kazumi. The cloned body Kazumi. Use Kazumi to lure out Tsunami. What does cloned body mean? Osawa is asking the same thing of Tsunami, and he answers by asking Osawa if he's familiar with the term doppelganger. Is it not a problem if he simply say it's a copy? It's their usual method of escape. The number of natural enemies demons have are extremely small, so if they manage to escape once, they can buy a considerable amount of time before encountering them again. With a smile, he says under his breath that he found her, looking at one particular picture of a group of girls. He continues, in other words, by using cloned bodies, they create several simultaneous entities and then scatter and escape separately. He stops to ask Aosawa if he knows the name of the girl in the center of the picture. Suddenly, stricken with shock, Osawa reveals that that is his daughter, and Tsunami thinks to himself with his knowing smile that it seems they are still within the predetermined harmony. Back at the classroom, the door is suddenly slammed open. The teacher demands to know who is this. They are in the middle of class. A claw reaches out and grabs the teacher by the head and throws him into the blackboard, cracking apart his skull. The body slides down. The students are completely unaffected, it seems. The cloaked figure wades through them, repeating that it will abduct Kazumi. The monster spots her and announces as much. One of the friends she had been discussing the nightmare with recently suddenly realizes that the prediction from the nightmare was today. Kazumi is going to be taken away by this monster that just killed their teacher. He decides that he can't just sit here and watch. He can't let her disappear. He's in love with her. He stands up and wraps his arms around the monster and shouts at Kazumi to run away. She's too stunned to move. The monster uses both claws to grab the boy by the skull and lift him off the ground. And even in this moment, he still yells for her to run as the monster joyously repeats the word, devour. Kazumi only sits there motionless as the boy's blood splatters her face. A scream erupts down the hallway, and Tsunami tells Osawa to lead him to the classroom as they begin to run. He reaches the classroom too late, it seems. The ordeal is already over, and the monster and Kazumi are gone. All that's left are the shocked students and the bodies. Tsunami silently remarks to himself that someone broke through the predetermined harmony. He approaches a girl with glasses to ask her what happened, and she's momentarily starstruck. thinking of Elrig from the Michael Moorcock books. Osawa arrives at the classroom, visibly out of breath, as Tsunami is leaving. He relays that a teacher and a student were killed, but Osawa asks what of his daughter. Tsunami only tells him to leave the rest to him and takes off. While running, he thinks of how not a single person paid attention to that teacher's death. It's not over yet. Following the scent of doll, a word we have seen before, and with context now, we can assume is the monster. He knows this is an invitation, and so he follows, stopping at a building when a voice comes saying that it has grown tired of waiting for him, revealing a cloaked figure, though a different one, crouched on top of a set of stairs, one who has encountered Tsunami before and is glad to see him once more. A demon with a horn, Doji Imawami. Imawami says it's been 56 years since Tsunami annihilated him, right? And Tsunami says he forgot. With a crazed look, the demon continues that the land of the dead was dark, cold, and lonely. He was thinking only of Tsunami the whole time, about how he would destroy him. Unmoved, Tsunami responds only saying, "Pretty gloomy, eh?" The demon monologues further. He didn't have enough time last time. He just couldn't make it. But, thanks to Tsunami, he has plenty of time this time. He has made a special one just for him. He shouts the name of his sorcery, Starving Golem, and declares that Tsunami can't defeat this. Doll, the giant golem roars, now devoid of his cloak, as Imawami reveals that under his own cloak is Kazumi. He declares that he will enjoy this scene. The fleshy golem leaps down a set of stairs. Tsunami whips an ember at it, but it's fast and dodges, coming in with speed to slam its fist down on the demon slayer, narrowly missing. Tsunami remarks on the speed as it goes in for another strike, which he dodges. Giving a signature snap, 3 embers erupt, but seem to miss. The monster leaps at Tsunami for another strike, but the sorcerer uses his hand to spring off of the ground, landing on his feet at the end of his evasion. The monster is already upon him immediately after, and Tsunami dodges its claw, grabbing it in a hold and planting embers along the arm. Something is wrong, though. The creature moves past, landing a strike to Tsunami's shoulder as its arm falls to the ground. As Tsunami kneels, grasping the bleeding wound, Imawami taunts him. What's wrong? Imawami hovers over the shoulder of the golem, which stands, now missing one arm, and he continues his taunt. The embers do not spread through the air. It contacts the opponent's body and flows through their entire body. However, it is only possible if the body is connected. The golem, which is a huge collection of hungry spirits, can sever any of the spirits according to its own intentions. Imawami lets out a small snicker as he goes on. A natural enemy is not a natural enemy. After 35 years, the predetermined harmony in the land of the dead will now be fulfilled. Tsunami licks the blood from his palm and coldly states that this will cost Doji Imawami. Though it's really frustrating, he will withdraw for now. He swings his arm suddenly, throwing blood into the air, and Imawami sees the plot for what it is. He shouts for the golem to get away. The blood detonates in a large explosion, and Tsunami is gone. With him gone, Imawami celebrates. Tsunami calls the school from a phone booth some distance away, and while initially he is told that Principal Osawa is not available, the principal soon picks up the phone demanding to know what has happened to his daughter. Tsunami only says that she should be safe, for now, but requests that they send a car. Soon he is in a car with Osawa, who tells him that they need to have him treated at the hospital, but Tsunami says to take him to Kamakura. There isn't much time. Osawa tries to reason with him, but Tsunami, unlike his normal demeanor, tells Osawa to shut up. It surprises the man, but Tsunami continues that if Osawa wants to save his daughter, he needs to do as he says. What's in Kamakura? It's the Wakimi family. Tsunami steps out of the car and says that he should only be 30 minutes and requests that Osawa sit and wait there. As he approaches, uneasy on his feet, he says to himself that He's sure Ionosuke will be shocked. Sure enough, a short time later, girls are trying to restrain Ionosuke, pleading with him that he has a wedding tomorrow, but he demands they cancel it. He passes Tsunami, who asks where he's going, and he yells that he's been saying it from the start. He's going to avenge Tsunami. Then it registers. Tsunami levels his gaze, saying, "It's annoying. The demon is his prey." The girls release Ionosuke as he turns to acknowledge the demon slayer, saying he's cold as usual. What's he going to do with that wounded body? To which Tsunami answers, he's already had the wound closed up by someone named Jusen. This man, who appears to be an older Chinese man, stands behind him asking what he's saying. It's only closed on the surface. He hasn't done anything inside. The muscles in his shoulder are ripped to shreds. The outer skin is the same for both humans and dolls, but the insides can't simply have a spring put in. Ionosuke approaches Tsunami and touches his chest, which is responded to by Tsunami asking, "What is it?" Ionosuke tells him that he's angry to think that this beautiful body was trampled by a savage demon, that it was defiled by a terrible brute. It makes him feel horrified. Tsunami responds with a thank you, but he just does not have the time. The demon is already in possession of the cloned body. He needs to settle the score tonight. Jusen says he sees. It must not happen that the demon slayer is driven back by a demon. They approach a set of double doors, and Ionosuke pushes them open. Inside, the room is dark, and Tsunami asks, when did they come in? Referring to a woman in the room, and Ionosuke says that today will be the 94th day. The last one took a year and 39 days to make, so please don't expect too much. In the darkness of the room, next to a single candle, is seated a woman, and before her, a small vase-like vessel. She invites them in, and Ionosuke greets her, saying it's been a minute, and addressing her as Array, before announcing that they are entering. The woman seems to have her eyes closed, and states that it has been some time since the last time she saw the young master. She's been expecting him. Ionosuke is puzzled. She was? She says she finished the piece 4 days ago and requests Tsunami to please use it. Ionosuke asks how she knew, and she says because she is blind, she can see a little more of the world than those who can see. Tsunami thanks her, and she replies that it is simply her job. And in his own reply, Tsunami says that he will certainly use it, the jar of the Wakimi family. But Ionosuke asks if she finished it 4 days ago, why didn't she leave the room? The girl responds that she was working on ideas for her next work. Now outside, Ionosuke asks Tsunami not to mind Array. She's always like that. By the way, is he sure about doing this all alone? Tsunami snickers and says they can't let the groom get injured, can they? But Ionosuke says it's just the typical arranged marriage. She's the daughter of some politician, and letting on that there may be more to this, Tsunami remarks with the following: to go so far as to marry off your own daughter to make her commit suicide. It's just, the world hasn't changed. And Ionosuke replies with a smile that although it's just a little over a week of familial ties, it holds great significance to this country. Tsunami gives his own smile and says he'll send a condolence gift along with the wedding gift tomorrow. As he departs, Ionosuke says after him that he says it every time, but try not to sustain too many external injuries. Osawa contemplates the fate of his daughter in his car as Tsunami arrives and joins him, saying, rest assured, if it's until tomorrow morning, his daughter's life will be fine. But the man wants to know what's in the box. Tsunami tells him that the box is called a gehobako. It's used to store tools and things like cursed sorcery. He thinks to himself about how it's good he got the jar, but he has to figure out where the demon's nest could be. Osawa interrupts his thoughts, telling him that he's been thinking about something for a while. The missing students, The brutally murdered vice principal, the teacher slammed against the blackboard. None of these seemed to concern the students in the slightest. But those same students screamed in shock and terror at the decapitated body of the male student because it was outside of the predetermined harmony, wasn't it? If so, then why was that male student killed? For what reason did that demon have to commit murder outside of the predetermined harmony? Tsunami answers that, depending on the difference in the demon's abilities, there are cases where the predetermined harmony is disrupted due to some kind of mental shock or conflict. Pondering this, Osawa presses further. So, Tsunami is saying that boy had some sort of reason to break out of the predetermined harmony, causing him to get murdered. So, say for example, you witness your father get devoured to death. In a world governed by predetermined harmony, those who have broken free from it, whether they are normal or abnormal aside, isn't it the case that those who act in a way that should be expected of a person when viewed relatively are treated as madmen? Tsunami responds that there are indeed people who have become madmen, referencing our first scene from directly before this chapter started. Osawa brings up Yoko Hasakawa, the eldest daughter of the vice principal who was brutally murdered yesterday. At the hospital, Osawa and Tsunami pass by a station nurse who tries to tell them that visiting hours have ended. Osawa starts to tell her it's important, but Tsunami need only smile and tell the woman that they only need 10 minutes, and ask that she please let them go. Clearly smitten, she blushes and says okay. He could even take more time. The woman then leads the two down the hallway, telling them that if they want to meet the patient in 305, it's useless. Her father just died, so she's been a bit off since then. Since she was hospitalized, she's been crying nonstop, saying Dad was eaten by a demon, and it's so creepy. She's scheduled for a mental evaluation tomorrow. Depending on the result of that, she'll likely be moved to a psychiatric ward. They arrive at the room, and Tsunami requests that she keep watch. The nurse asks that they be fast. It would be really bad if the head nurse found out. Inside, the girl is crying as the door opens. She asks who's there, and Osawa greets her and introduces himself. Upon hearing that he's the principal, she becomes upset, saying she's done. Go away. She's tired of being treated like a maniac. Even though everyone knows, they all think she's crazy. She continues to cry, stating she's not crazy, and Tsunami only requests that she looks at him. He introduces himself and says he's a demon slayer. He will avenge her father. She buries her face into his abdomen and begins to cry harder. After she's calmed down, she tells her story. Her dad was doing schoolwork in his study, and her mother told her to bring him his tea. Behind her dad, through the window, there were several human-like figures moving. They broke through and began to chant, "Bound him, bound him, vice principal, vice principal." It didn't even take a minute. Not only was he mauled to death, not even his bones remained. Even so, both her mom and brother just calmly called the emergency line. Tsunami asks if they said anything else, and the girl replies that they just kept saying something about the meat being tough. But now that he says it, at the end it was, go back, go back, go back to the school. We ate him, we ate him. We ate vice principal. Go back, go back, go back to the nest. Osawa questions this, but Tsunami understands. The large hole in the old school building is a camouflage after all. If that's the case, the demon's still inside the barrier. It took 35 years, but Tsunami has finally broken free of the predetermined harmony of Doji Imawami. The girl continues that it's a strange story, but her dad kind of looked happy while being eaten by the monsters. His expression was like he was being liberated from something. Now that she thinks about it, it always felt like her dad was living in fear of something. Tsunami addresses the girl by name and asks if she could keep what they just talked about a secret between the three of them here. He wants her to promise to never tell the story to anyone else. If she can do that, everything will go back to the way it was. She hesitantly agrees, and he continues, to make up for it. Once he beats it, once he has avenged her father, Tsunami will come back here again. Osawa takes Tsunami back to the old school building, and as he exits the car, he tells Osawa that if he is not back by morning, contact the Wakimi family. Tsunami approaches the old building as a gust of wind blows by, and he strips off his head bandage. From the windows, eyes peer down at him, muttering that Tsunami is here. Osawa is back at his home, and his wife asks what he's doing home at this time. He says he just forgot something, and his wife cracks wise, saying, "How rare, finally losing it at an old age, huh?" But this is serious for Osawa. He starts to say if something ever happens to him, but she can't hear him because she's doing laundry. He tells her it's nothing, and that he's heading out. Once in the car, he asks for forgiveness. He's going to settle the score. Tsunami enters the building, and Imawami taunts him, asking what business does a coward have with him. Tsunami's wounds are probably not fully healed. It's revealed that Imawami hovers above the mummified corpses of the girls of Kazumi's dream, and in front of them, unconscious on the ground, is Kazumi herself. Imawami tells the golem to go, destroy his natural enemy, Tsunami Togen. Tsunami senses the presence of the golem right before it bursts through the windows to his left, but quick on his feet, he moves out of the way. The monster is also fast and is quickly reaching out to grab him with both arms, but Tsunami hops above as the arms close together. He tries his embers but misses, and so he begins to run down the hallway, looking for a good spot to attack. He spots a room and stops, only to be set upon by the golem, which he quickly deters with his embers. But this causes one of the creatures that makes up its body launch itself onto him, and it begins biting into Tsunami's shoulder. With an ember in his palm, he slaps it, destroying the little creature, and also the head of the golem. But the monster only sprouts a new head with a smile. Standing with his back to the wall and calmly holding the Gehobako, he awaits as the golem rushes him, but then it stops mid-attack. Unenthused, Tsunami states that it finally noticed. There were 108 embers around it, all facing inward, existing in its blind spots. He tells the golem that he wouldn't move if he were it. He has arranged it so that if even one ignites, all will catch fire in a chain reaction. The golem will touch them if it moves even an inch. And with that, Tsunami leaves. As he heads up the stairs back to Imawami, a bang is heard behind him, followed by a scream. And Tsunami silently thinks to himself with a smile, such childish tricks. If you can't burn it from the inside, then just burn it from the outside. Tsunami approaches the pile of desks and chairs that makes the barrier. The fluorescent bulb above him flashes to life. He grabs a leg of one of the desks, and the barrier explodes. No longer smiling as the smoke swirls about, Tsunami states that he came to collect the debt of Doji Imawami. Imawami seems unsurprised, stating that it is as expected of the great Togen Tsunami, so he beat the golem. With a snicker, he says that it looks like his wounds have reopened, and indeed, there is blood running down the hand which holds the Gehobako. Imawami asks Tsunami, is he going out of his way to add more shame, or is this where the bloodline of the Genji ends? Tsunami begins to slide the top off of the box, and it suddenly frightens Imawami, who begins to panic, saying, "Impossible. Is that?" And Tsunami interrupts, saying he told Imawami he came to collect his debt. The pot of Wakimi. Any demon that perishes within 1 mile radius of it will be sealed inside for eternity. It seems this is reserved for very special demons, as Imawami begins protesting, stating that it's not like he committed mass murder, there's no way they would allow the use of the jar. But Tsunami says Imawami knows nothing, and he supposes a small fry like him has no way of knowing. Ever since he took on the responsibility of being a demon slayer, that jar exists only to preserve his dignity and legend. The demon has gone a bit too far. With a chuckle, it's Tsunami's turn to taunt. Is Imawami getting cold feet? The demon retorts with a shout. It seems that Tsunami does not know the position he's in. All Imawami needs to do is kill him and escape. The demon launches a blast of fire from his mouth, but Tsunami simply swivels to the side and it passes by harmlessly. He begins to charge, taunting once again. Which one of them doesn't realize the position they're in? He tosses an ember, snaps, and the side of Imawami's face explodes. Continuing in his confidence, Tsunami states that without his dolls, Imawami is no different from a child. The demon curses him and yells that no, there is no way he's going to let himself get sealed in some jar. What were those 35 years of predetermined harmony for? What was it for? The demon's bravado returns as he says he found her. He still has an ace up his sleeve. Tsunami slams open the door to the classroom holding Kazumi, and she looks at him with blank eyes. She's been possessed. Who's there? She's not letting anyone have her baby. Imawami tells her that it's Tsunami. He's trying to steal him and her baby. Standing off with the pair, Tsunami states that Imawami has stooped low and asked if his deceased leader taught him that. The demon yells to shut up. He will not allow him to insult his lord. He just needs to escape right here, right now. He then commands the possessed Kazumi to kill Tsunami and protect his clone. The girl charges and swipes at Tsunami, who seems to effortlessly dodge, though he takes a couple of small cuts to his face. Imawami yells at Tsunami that the girl isn't being controlled by sorcery. She's only acting in accordance with her instinct. As long as she isn't burned to ashes, she cannot be stopped. Tsunami fires an ember, striking the blackboard next to Imawami, who shouts at him, asking where he was aiming. The girl strikes Tsunami on the back from behind, hissing as he turns around and grabs her wrist. But then he lets go. Imawami is convinced that he has the upper hand, laughing at Tsunami, calling him naive. He still can't kill a girl, huh? No matter. He commands her to rip him apart. But the girl does not. She stands there, and Tsunami smiles as he falls to one knee. The girl begins to grip her stomach, complaining that it's burning. Imawami panics once again, demanding to know what Tsunami has done, and he replies with a smile that the demon already knows. He's turned the clone the demon put in her womb to ash. Kazumi begins to ask how could he do that to her baby. She yells she'll kill him as she rushes him and slams into him. But a voice comes, yelling at her to get back to her senses. Osawa rushes into the room, wielding a sword and yelling to snap out of it. Her trapped heart, her real feelings, she has to get back to herself. The demon launches a blast from his mouth, which strikes the principal in the shoulder, but he continues. People don't just live for its benefit, and he plunges the sword into Imawami, pinning him to the blackboard with it. The demon charges up, and a blast from its mouth burns the principal alive. Seeing this shocks Kazumi. Her father turns to her, fully engulfed in flame, reaching out to her, still pleading for her to get back to her real self, her real heart. The possessed Kazumi begins to cry as she looks on, her father crumbling in the flames. She then thinks back to the boy who also died for her. She comes back to her normal self and begins to plead for her father not to die. Still somehow hanging on, Osawa asks Tsunami if his death is part of the predetermined harmony, and Tsunami tells him he can rest assured that it is without a doubt his own will. Osawa smiles and tries to utter one last sentence, asking Kazumi to tell her mom, but he doesn't finish. Still pinned to the blackboard, Imawami is determined, declaring he won't let himself get stuffed into a jar. All of them will be his companions on the path to hell. He lets out one final blast, but Tsunami slams his palm into the ground and ruptures the room with a chain of embers going from the floor to the wall, across the ceiling, and finally to Imawami. Kazumi clings to Tsunami, and he tells her that all will be forgotten. about him and the demon, all except one thing. Her father risked his life to save her. The last panel taking place in the old school building being that of the jar. Back at the hospital, Yoko, the vice principal's daughter, awakes cheerfully, greeting her mother and apologizing for making her worry. Her mom is surprised and begins to cry. Yoko tells her it's okay now. It looks like the shock just made her a little crazy. The mother says she's so glad and that she was worried, but Yoko notices something and asks what it is. A giant bouquet of flowers. Her mother explains that when she came in this morning, she found a mountain of them by the door, but she doesn't know who. It's splendid white roses. But Yoko is crying now too. The end. But not quite. Zashiki Warashi continued. At the beginning of the hallway of the old school building still remains the mound of desks and chairs. Or is it a new barrier? A girl and a boy stand some distance away from it, remarking on it being the forbidden hallway. The teachers are also too scared to go in there. The boy asks what they're doing there, and the girl says they need to bring test tubes from the old chemistry lab room. There's a lot of urban legends about the hallway, and the boy agrees. They say a demon child lives there, right? Boo! Another boy has snuck up behind them. He laughs and says that the teacher told him to come as well, and then starts taunting them, asking if they really believe in those old rumors. The first boy says, it's not that, but it's kind of chilly in there, right? He tells the girl to wait there, but she says she's coming too. The boy informs the rest that they should be able to enter from under the desk at the far right, the one at the very bottom, and they proceed to crawl under, remarking on how many desks and chairs there are, almost like it was made in a panic to seal something. The boy who scared them says, perhaps, and as he emerges on the other side, is surprised at how clean it is. But then, one of the small little monsters appears over his shoulder and slits his throat. The other boy emerges and screams upon seeing his friend standing there, spewing blood from his wound. There's a rustling in the pile of desks and chairs behind him. A small claw pokes out, and then many of the little demonic creatures begin crawling out. The girl clings to him as they panic, watching as the little creatures eat their friend. Behind them, in the shadows of the hallway, a figure hovers a small distance off the ground and tells them that they are the people who came to get the test tubes 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and 15 years ago. The figure is that of a small-horned boy, and it declares that they brought his mommy. He was tired of waiting. The girl lets go of the boy and begins to walk towards the figure. Begins to protest, but is quickly set upon by the small creatures, which begin to devour him as well. The boy takes the girl and says he will introduce her to his mommy, and shows her the mummified girls. They are his other mommies. Outside the barrier, we see two men standing. One calls the other the principal, and says that with this, they can last 5 more years. Now, it's worth noting before I sign off, this is actually Zashiki Warashi, which was Sakio Kusei's debut short story. So whether or not this is actually meant to follow up the end of the book, or if this is just meant to give you the origins of the story as a bonus, I don't know. Either way, we're done.